Hello, Simone. I am excited to be talking to you today. Today, we are going to be talking about China and recent information that has come out through multiple angles that leads people to believe that China's total population, a lot of people know their fertility rate was lower than the official figure said it was. And
Yeah.
so they did all of this. Oh, we got it wrong. We're readjusting our population numbers. We're
Mhm.
readjusting our fertility rate numbers. Turns out that their total population is still being represented as dramatically higher than it really is. And this has major implications because it means that one, their entire stock market might be vastly overvalued right now, even given how fragile it is. And two, for people who are thinking about global population numbers right now, they might be way lower than we think they are. And this isn't just a China problem. I've also mentioned a lot recently, it's a Nigeria problem, which is another very populated country. A lot of people don't know, but Nigeria gives out oil money dollars to different provinces based on their reported population.
Oh,
And
no.
there's nobody overseeing the populations that the individual provinces are reporting. So there is always a huge incentive to lie in the extreme. And I mean, it's Africa, right? How corrupt are these numbers going to
So
be?
this is very similar to the Blue Zone scandal, which came out, whereby they found that all these supposedly very old people that lived in countries were not actually alive. It was their family members collecting their pensions and lying about them being alive. And here's just another issue of incentives being misaligned. People are lying about their populations because they get more money when they say that these people are there that aren't there.
Yeah. And I
Oh,
think that globally speaking, we may have to do a re-ledgering that's going to have people realize that the total global population is dramatically lower than anyone thinks it is, especially if you're looking at UN numbers. There was a case recently where somebody sent an email to the UN saying Brazil's own tabulation of their population shows it's 10 million less than yours. And the UN, in response, they go, why don't you update it? And they go, we don't want to alarm anyone. I'm like, and that's over a
oh.
double digit off from where their fertility population actually is.
Oof.
Percentage, double digit percentage off. So the UN is just lying through their teeth at this point to try to hide this.
Yeah.
So it turns out after recording this, the situation was astronomically worse than anyone anticipated. This first series of graphs I'm showing you, the red line is the actual fertility rate of these countries. The blue lines is UN's repeated projections of the fertility rate of these countries. What's interesting here is you can see with some, like Colombia, it never even was really attached to the real fertility rate. With others like Korea, every year they just expect it to stop going down anymore, which is just, well, negligence. They're lying to people. If we go to this next set here, you can see what's happening throughout Latin America. The red line is the real fertility rate, and all of the other lines are the UN every year saying, stop worrying about this. This is why the world's not panicking. If the world saw these red lines projected forwards by any reasonable equation, they would be shitting themselves right now. Look at this even in Africa and the Middle East. So here you have Tunisia and Turkey. The same thing is happening. And it's not just the UN. You also have IIASA and IHME. Every major organization is attempting to gaslight people about the severity of this. We're going to have a different episode where we go over this, but wow, I am shocked to see this coming out in a mainstream newspaper. Now, here I'd like you to take a moment to think, okay, if the UN is lying about all these other countries' fertility rates, and these countries' own governments are like, hey, actually, you are hugely overrepresenting our fertility rates. Imagine what's going on with China right now when their government doesn't want people to know how bad things are and has been famously able to push around the UN.
So specifically, China doesn't have a 1.4 billion person population. Their population is probably below 1 billion people and fell below 1 billion people a while ago.
So out of all the places, this is the place that I'm worried about the most.
Why?
Just the way they live, they're different.
What, Chinese people?
They just wreck everything. They make everything weird. That's what I'm worried about.
Expand on this, I don't understand what you mean.
Everything, chicken. Why is it orange in Chinatown? The way they write, the letters are weird. Their alphabet's not like ours. Theirs are like someone testing out a biro. Everything's... There's no logic to anything that they do.
There is. Of course there's a logic to it.
The way they read a book, it's all the other way around, from back to front instead of from front to back and up and down. And everything that we've done, they've gone, right, we're going to do it weirder.
But let's talk about this. A lot of this episode, and I always want to give credit when a lot of it comes from somebody else's research, came from a show called Lay's Real Talk or Lee's Real Talk. Anyway, pretty decent China Watcher show. It's certainly not as good for me as like China's Fat Chasers, but she does real solid work and she sometimes breaks stories. And it's definitely a source that I think people should have in their back pocket if they are doing China stuff. But everything that she's talking about here is data that can be independently checked. So first, there's an argument that China's birth statistics are inflated as evidenced by the discrepancy between reported births and the number of BCG vaccinations administered. Logic. In China, the BCG vaccine is mandatory and given to newborns within 24 hours of birth. Therefore, the number of BCG vaccines should closely match the number of births. A Chinese researcher conducted a study comparing the official birth data to BCG vaccine administration records from 2008 to 2021. The study found each bottle of BCG vaccine can vaccinate between 1 to 5 babies with an average of 1.35 babies per bottle. Using this average, the calculated number of births based on BCG vaccine usage was consistently lower than official birth statistics. Over the 14-year period from 2008 to 2021, the discrepancy totaled 58 million births. Extrapolating this trend back to the 1980s, when China's economic reforms began, the total overestimate could be as high as 178 million people. This research argues that this discrepancy suggests systematic overreporting. And I will have a link to this study in the description. It's in Mandarin, so beware of that.
Wow.
Then there's data from the Lunar New Year travel study. A significant decrease in Lunar New Year travel between 2019 and 2023 suggests a potential population decline, particularly among lower income groups. Logic. Lunar New Year is the peak travel period in China, with almost everyone traveling to visit family. A large decrease in travel numbers, especially among lower income groups, could indicate population decline. Data and source. Official data from Xiaonan News Agency shows in 2019, 2.984 billion person trips during the 40-day Lunar New Year period. In 2023, 1.556 billion trips during the same period, which represents a 47% decrease overall. So these might be representing very large population drops. Breaking down the data, air and rail travel is typically used by more affluent travelers, decreased by only 15%. Bus and road travel, typically used by lower income groups, saw the largest decrease. Calculation, assuming 422 million people, 30% of the official 1.4 billion population, didn't travel due to poverty or old age. In 2019, 986 million people made 2.984 billion trips, an average of 3 trips per person. In 2023, assuming 2.5 trips per person due to economic factors, this suggests a potential population decrease of 556 million people who didn't travel in 2023. Now, this
Something ain't right. Yeah.
now, hold on. I'll explain what would cause this. And she's actually done a different piece where she goes into this in a lot more detail.
Okay.
But she argues that this unexplained decrease is due to unreported population decline due to COVID-19 fatalities. So not only is the overall population way less than they're reporting, but they're hiding a huge chunk of the population that died during COVID-19. She has a different episode where she goes into kindergarten closures because there was a sudden increase in kindergarten closures where 20% closed year over year this last year. And she says this indicates that a lot of people were either died during COVID or something like that, or et cetera. And they decrease in specific regions at really high levels, specifically smaller towns. And we don't have the rural data. But she argues that the country could have lost more than 20% of its population in COVID. And some of the
simply from
CCP's
deaths.
from
sickness.
death. And some of the CCP's behavior indicates that this is the case. By that, what I mean is right now they've had a mandate to destroy records of deaths during the COVID period in a lot of hospitals. And we'll go into more data that the COVID deaths may have been dramatically higher than they're reporting. But so not only is their overall population lower because they were lying about some stuff, but their overall population is lower because of people dying. And keep in mind, for the flight thing, it was the low and middle class numbers that dropped this huge amount, not the upper class numbers. That didn't drop that much at all.
And theoretically,
which
people who were uniquely hurt in a disease outbreak would be those who can't go to a private hospital, for example, and get better treatment. So that could be the play. I see.
or were more likely just to be shipped to one of the, I forgot what they call them, not
Oh, those
concentration camps.
really, scary isolation zones where you just went to a cell.
Yeah, really bad situation there. And the next is the salt consumption analysis. This was an analysis of regional salt consumption data, which suggests China's population is significantly lower than official figures. Salt consumption per capita is relatively stable. By analyzing regional salt sales data and known per capita consumption rates, one can estimate the population. A Chinese researcher conducted a comprehensive study of salt consumption data from 2000 to 2022. The methodology involved collecting regional salt consumption data from various news reports over 20 years. Using known daily salt intake figures for different regions, ranging from 8.5 grams to 11.5 grams per person per day, they calculated the estimated population based on salt consumption data and compared it to official census data. Findings from 2000 to 2014, calculated population was 19.29% lower than the official data. In 2015 to 2022, calculated population was approximately 31% lower than official data. So again, the huge chunk disappeared there. So they've been over-reporting for a while, but now they're not even reporting what happened with COVID. Applying the 31% discrepancy to the official 2022 population figure of 1.4 billion yields an estimated population of 986 million. The full study will be linked to in the description. What's interesting here is the arguments are supporting from multiple directions. So it's not just one study. They're all showing this huge, like 31% lower number. And then she ran a different set of math, just for another set of math you can run here, where she looked at the reported fertility rate of China versus India and starting populations of the two countries, and then showed that China showed a much higher growth than it should have in overall population when contrasting with India. And then people could be like, that might be because they have better medical care. And so then what she did is she looked at, okay, what was the lifespan increase between China and India during those periods? And India had a larger lifespan increase over that period than China had, which implied that the numbers should have favored India further, which implied we are seeing systematically wrong numbers here.
Wow, what good sleuthing on her part. This just sounds, these are such amazing questions. I'd be so proud of one of our kids if they looked at a problem from this many different angles. I really respect her.
Yeah, I really respect her as well. Yeah, there was also a Russian and a Japanese study that put their population at around 800 million. Specifically, the Russian expert's name was Viktor Mikov, and he concluded China's population is not the official, the number that's nearing 1.5 billion.
This seems like a classic China problem in terms of the way that rewards or funding is dealt out to different regions, causing major problems. I recall this being an issue in the height of
Oh,
early communist
yeah,
China with
this is really interesting. So Russians gathered Chinese urban populations, added them up, and then arrived at a total urban population at 280 million.
okay.
And assuming the rural urban populations have a 1-to-1 ratio, then China's actual population should be around 500 million.
Why should they be 1-to-1? That doesn't make sense to me.
But if total rural population carries a higher weight, it may not be 1-to-1, but they said that China's total population should not exceed 800 million. But I'd expect their urban population to be higher than their rural population,
Exactly.
given China's recent push on this.
Yeah.
That is fascinating.
Hmm.
So we've got more stuff here. Here's an article. And so just in terms of like China having a lower population than it otherwise might have had. One here, for people who are wondering how big this difference is, it could be, so they did two different calculations here. So what you might have is a real population of, oh yeah, so this was just a 944 million number I already said. Okay, now in terms of who is saying that more people died during COVID than official numbers, this is not an urban monoculture cover-up. There was an article by the CDC on this topic, and there was an article in Nature on this topic, and The Atlantic did a piece called "Can a Million Chinese People Die and Nobody Know? Official statistics on COVID can't be trusted because they serve Beijing's political interests. Making the dead disappear is only part of it." And then evidence of underreporting. Satellite imagery revealed heightened activity at crematorium centers during the outbreak. domestic footage of overwhelmed hospital wards circulated on Chinese social media before being censored. A mourning and funeral index based on online search volume for related terms indicated 712,000 excess mortalities, so nearly a million excess mortalities from December 2022 to February 2023.
Oh, that's recent. That's after the pandemic. 2022 to 2023 is when the pandemic is very quote unquote over. That's
whatever the case may be, over a million more people died. So basically, they're just hiding their deaths. They're fudging their births. The whole Chinese situation is not only paper tigered, it's a Potemkin village. It's fake. It isn't an actual economic superpower in the way that we believe that it is. And I think that right now, another thing that she's been arguing in her recent videos, and I actually think she's right about this, is when we ask why is Xi Jinping not doing logical things to protect his economy or his people right now, given how bad things are,
yeah.
the answer could be that he's trying to transition into a wartime economy. And a wartime economy is not going to be driven by consumer demand. It's going to be driven by centralized production queues.
Are there signs that they are centralizing their production?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Keep in mind, all the billionaires have been like disappearing. They've been centralizing all their major industries. Remember when what's his face, Alibaba guy disappeared, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
very much a move to a.
How does that have to do with what does that have to do with centralizing production?
Okay, remember how we have defined in other videos the difference between a socialist state and a fascist state?
Yes.
Whereas a socialist state puts the state industry, like the economic means of production, under the state for the purposes of distributing wealth as equally as possible. Whereas a fascist state puts the means of production under a state for the purpose of spreading a particular ideology or worldview and keeping existing oligarchs in power, i.e. what the Democrats are doing. That's why the Democrats are fundamentally a fascist party. But a lot of people don't understand this. They think I'm like exaggerating when I say that. Anyway, that's what China is doing right now, is they're transitioning to a fascist economic system where they are putting the means of production under the authority of the existing power structure to heighten the power of the existing oligarchical structure, because I think that they know that an economic collapse is impossible. Basically, the entire economy there has been more of a Ponzi scheme than the rest of the world's economy for a while. It's like foreign investors come in, your money will always grow. Look at how many people we have. Imagine how big this could be. And I think that very similar to what happened in Japan in the 80s, but about 1,000 times worse.
What are the implications of this?
What
And
do
if
you
they're
mean?
transitioning to a wartime economy, do we have good reason to believe, therefore, that they are going to come for Taiwan faster?
Oh, I think they meant to go for Taiwan by now, but Russia's F up in Ukraine has significantly lowered their desire for that particular conflict. That's my read of it. Like, all of this, I think, started before they saw what happened in Ukraine. And right now there's like an ongoing conversation. Do we do it? Do we not?
Because I thought it's more of just a siege scenario, and Taiwan, from an energy independence standpoint, is so screwed that all you have to do is just besiege them.
Do you know how much our GPUs that we've been buying up, Simone and I have been buying up GPUs, are going to be worth if Taiwan gets sieged?
Value will look pretty
We're
good.
going to get a very good resale value on those. By the way, one of the things we're looking for right now is a CTO for the company. So if anyone's like a GPU specialist or like running data center specialist, let us know. We'd really be interested in working with you, or has a good technical resume otherwise for a position at a startup. But yeah, so the implication could be that they're going for Taiwan. I don't know. It's just such a dumb decision if they do. But it could be with the goal of securing the existing administration, knowing that an economic collapse of the region is not going to happen, but already underway.
Golly. Okay. Yeah, I was reading in totally outside of, let's say someone wants to write all this off as conspiracy theorizing and they choose to not believe any of the stats presented. I was just reading that China's getting to the point that for every child born, 6 people are dying. It's that bad.
Wait, is
But
that bad now? That's horrifying.
yeah, it Let me make sure I have that right. Okay, here we go. A demographer warns that if China's fertility rate remains on its downward trajectory, eventually 6 people will die for every newborn. This was from an article called China's Pro-Birth Policies Not Yet Enough to Counter Demographic Crisis, Expert Warns, published in the South China Morning Post. So that's mainstream, not question, people talking about just how bad things are, how their fertility rate dropped to 1.09 in 2022, but that's likely highly overstated. We don't have numbers for 2023 officially. And to your point about this, anything they do send to us may be very highly overstated. Even in China's best possible, most enthusiastic and optimistic number presentation, we're still looking at an extremely dire scenario. If things are even worse and as bad as you describe, and as bad as people are seeing through things like baby vaccinations and salt intake and vacation travel and mourning, it's bad. It's also very concerning that apparently excess deaths are so much higher, even between 2022 and 2023.
Well,
It implies
gets me on this, and I think that a lot of people. What were you going to say? It implies.
That it's not just a COVID thing, and it's not just people being hopeless and not having kids anymore thing, that people, the country may also be deeply unwell in other ways that we aren't fully aware of.
I guess my takeaway from a lot of this is, one, India is likely a bigger player in the global future than we think. China has basically what this means is India's population is higher than China's population. And going forwards for the rest of human history, we can project right now will continue to be higher. But in addition to that, it just means that China is, when people are predicting future events, do not over-index China's role in those events, I guess I would say. When I talk to a lot of people, I would say this is one of the, in terms of smart people who I talk to, like really smart people, consistent mistakes that they make, and the single most consistent mistake I see they make is believing too much that China has a future. Seeing them trying to play out the roles and the moves that they make 50 years from now, 100 years from now, thinking that they are going to find a way to fix this quickly, when they should have already done that. Like, it's basically too late for them at this point. Even if they start going on a forced birth campaign or something like that, I just wouldn't expect that much benefit from it, given that it would need to admit things that mainstream Chinese officials just aren't admitting right now. Keep in mind, they were one of the first countries to jail someone who was doing gene editing in humans very publicly, right? Like, they made it clear, we don't do genetics here. We don't believe in genetics here. All humans exactly the same. And that's going to make any sort of a campaign they do to try to increase fertility rate likely create an adverse outcome. So I just don't, and it also means that their existing power on the world stage might be being overstated. And a lot of China's existing power, people misunderstand. They're like, their existing power is due to what they produce. And I'm like, that is not true. Their existing power is due to the amount of money American and European investors have poured into China. That is where their valuation comes from. Obviously, Chinese.
So you mean people buying companies, putting companies in,
people buying stock, investing in, etc.
Interesting.
Investing in China is why China has a high valuation. Like, when you're looking at like Chinese GDP or like the share of the global market or blah, 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 a lot of this is like basically fudged numbers due to the people who have put money into that. And that's also why you don't get this counter narrative of actually China is not that relevant, politically speaking, because nobody benefits from this. The wealthy oligarchs who run our society, they have tons of money invested in this that they can't quickly get out. And so they're not going to want it widely disseminated that actually China is already over. So they don't publish it in their newspapers. They don't talk about it. They don't promote people who are talking about it. It's the same with the political apparatuses. It neither serves the conservatives nor the Democrats well to say China is not particularly relevant as a power player. Because people want to focus on what do we do if Taiwan gets attacked? And as I've always said, what we do if Taiwan gets attacked is nothing. because Taiwan won't exist in 100 years at their current fertility rate. We are not saving a thing of persistent value by saving Taiwan at this point. If Taiwan can get their fertility rate up, I would commit American force to help them. But at their current fertility rate, you are just delaying their death by a century. There is no point. That's very seriously. A country with a fertility rate that's hovering around 1, halving their population every generation, why would I have our either capital or actual human beings dying to defend that? That's insane.
Yeah. But by that logic, are you trying to argue that we should only fight for countries with high birth rates? So if someone invades a high birth rate African country, defend them, hurry.
No, it's not just based on the birth rate. It's based on their relevance in a future Earth scenario.
That's Africa. They're the
Parts of
ones who are going to
Africa might
decline
be, but right
last.
now, I don't think that you are actually really helping that much in terms of the future trajectory of Earth by committing tons of resources to preventing random groups in Africa from attacking each other. Whether or not it just all comes out in the wash there because the infrastructure and the economic infrastructure in that region is so poorly developed that you're just really not getting much of an outcome from that. But if somebody was to say, oh, would you care? Like, where would you care about defending if they were attacked? Like, what's a country where you're like, this country is going to have an outsized level of impact in the future when I look at current
India.
fertility rates?
So India.
No, Israel.
Oh.
Israel's the big example here. Technologically, they're going to matter in 50 to 100 years. Fertility wise, they're going to matter in 50 or 100 years. In terms of who is it worth investing to protect, Israel is who it's worth investing to protect. Taiwan is not particularly worth investing to protect. In terms of the Ukraine, I thought that it was worth it to just show that Russia couldn't push people around in the beginning. I no longer think it's worth it. Now they're just fighting over land, and neither country is going to matter much in the future either. And Russia has already expended all of their military power.
Yeah, I guess if this were like an elimination-based reality TV show and you're trying to decide who to ally yourself with, if there's someone who's just clearly tanking, they lack the charisma or physical prowess or whatever the show's based on, cooking ability, baking ability to hang in there, yes, you really need to look at someone's ability to be there in the future. And it's not just whether you like them or whether...
I like Taiwan a lot.
Yeah. They're a contender. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're just not a contender. And it's the same with China. So keep in mind, like China and Taiwan are enemies. I am very pro-Taiwan. I am very anti-CCP, but I admit that they both are dealing with this population problem, and there really isn't an out for them at this point that I can see. And so when people are like, "Oh, what do you think the China is going to be doing in X many?" I'm like, they're not going to be doing anything that matters. Now, this does have impacts on like semiconductor production and everything like that, but I think we'll be able to offshore Taiwan's semiconductor production, at least the relevant parts, before things go tits up. Keep in mind that because we've hit a Moore's law sort of ceiling now, we are entering optimal semiconductor world at this point. Do you understand what I mean by that, Simone? So historically, if one company was like really ahead of other companies in semiconductor production, it didn't really make sense to try to compete with them because it's you've got you want to try to catch up with this company, but every year they're improving so much. They're like 30% better every year. So even if I figure out how they're making the semiconductors they're making this year, I'm not going to be able to compete with them economically by the time I get that up, because by the time I get that fab up, by the time I get all that up, it's going to be 5-10 years from now, and they're going to be like a generation, not one generation, like 10 generations ahead of me, right? Like I will be able to make very simple semiconductors, but nothing particularly impressive. But now the advancement in semiconductor production has lowered dramatically. You are getting very small increment because we've reached the edges of what physics can do. And so this gives other companies and countries a long time to catch up with this. And I think the next major advancement in semiconductors that we should focus on from a human civilizational perspective is how can we, one, lateralize semiconductor production. Right now, it takes 40 different countries all developing. The lasers are developed in Norway, and the plans are developed in California, and the end products developed in Taiwan. How can we lateralize this process, and how can we microtize this process, i.e., I think we're going to need to focus on more modular and smaller semiconductors as global supply chains begin to break down. Even if they are slightly slower, it's going to be equally useful given the way that cloud and networks work and the way that you can just chain like GPUs together.
Hmm. If you were living in China right now, let's say in a place like Shanghai, where the birth rate is so low, where would you move? If Shanghai's fertility, by the way, is 0.6 as of 2023, so not even this year, lower than
I'd get out.
0.4.
I don't think that there is a way to I think that China is internally burning itself. I think that the situation in China is going to get astronomically worse than it is today.
I think they're going to start blocking emigration, though. I feel like
They
they're
already stopped. They stopped it like 5 years ago. They put major bans and restrictions on people out migrating. Yeah.
so then that's not a realistic. Or you're just saying figure out how to essentially
Figure out like you're running from a Holocaust that's about to happen. Like figure out like you don't get how bad things are going to get. That's my read of China right now. You do not know, you cannot comprehend. If you want to know how bad things are going to get in China in the future, ask your grandparents about the Great Famine. Okay? That's the scale things are going to in China right now.
Yeah, what does worry me is, again, those excess deaths between 2022 and 2023. Like, we're not in the middle of the pandemic anymore. And to my knowledge, there have been no immense natural disasters in China, though, okay, I'm not following the news that closely. I do wonder, especially after all these stories of people being like buildings collapses or infrastructure not really working well. And I guess it's just so hard to trust what you're hearing, because then when you hear from anyone who is in any way proud of China, and I think there's a lot to be proud of in China. I think the Chinese people are awesome, and I've traveled through China in a decent amount, not an amazing amount, but I've been to like Zhangjiajie and Changsha, not like your typical just Beijing and Hong Kong and Shanghai, though I've done those too. It's an amazing place. But when you talk with anyone who has pride in China, then it's just propaganda talking points. So I don't know who to consult, right?
I'll tell you who to consult. And this is the thing also about out migrating from China. Historic and real Chinese culture is better preserved in the immigrant communities than it is preserved within CCP China. If you're like, I want to get in touch with my Chinese traditional roots, you are better off living in one of the American Chinese immigrant communities than you are under CCP China, because they often were founded by individuals from before the Cultural Revolution, and they maintain more true, uninterrupted through lines to traditional Chinese culture.
I do think that's really interesting that when in some countries you get these selective pressures where people with a certain fidelity to a certain culture just leave en masse, and then anyone who stays basically gets completely changed through those same selective pressures, and then the original country is somewhere else now. And you can even see this in not necessarily in holistic cultural sets or cultural mimetic religious whatever sets, but even just in accents. Like I've heard it argued that the true British accent of, we'll say, before the American Revolution may be more alive in some versions of American speech in like the 1900s than even the modern British accent, which is an interesting. Yeah, because like certain groups migrate and like things evolve. It's not like after a point of great migration, do things stay the same in the original home country? No, things change. In fact, often when there is a great migration, it's because there's significant change in the home country. Yeah. So I like that point about cultural fidelity maybe not even being in China. And if you really love China and if you believe in China, you maybe need to rebuild that somewhere else.
Yeah,
I like that way of looking at it.
It can be rebuilt, but I don't think it can be rebuilt in China. Not so long as Xi Jinping is in charge. Now, and this is one area where I realize I have a big difference between my friends who believe that China has a future and me, is they're like, Xi Jinping, he won't be in charge for long. He's got replacements in the wing. As soon as he F's up enough, they're going to replace him. And my belief is the opposite of that. I don't think they have real replacements lined up for him. I have looked into these people's. They've said, "Oh, this guy is competent." I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't think that they have a good replacement for him. And
If
I
I
don't
were
think
him, I would not want to take, or if I were anyone else, I would not want to take his place. I would be terrified to take his place.
I don't think that I think that he's for a long time purged everyone competent who might take his position. I don't think that there is somebody who can competently take his position. I think when Xi Jinping falls, a lot of people think, oh, this is when things begin to fix themselves. No, I think that's when warlords begin to take over. I think that's when things begin to fracture or they go incredibly stupid, a la Venezuela, like a bus driver taking over. I think that as much as Xi Jinping is a problem, he's also a bulwark against complete idiocy. And I have intense fear around what happens when he does fall, because I think people think some competent bureaucrat is going to take over. And that's not the tea leaves I'm reading. The tea leaves I'm reading is some idiot's going to take over who we would never have assigned power with intention. And if I'm wrong about this, if the system is still working, if they still can get a competent person in there and they can get rid of Xi Jinping, China has a chance. But it's got no chance under Xi Jinping. Or
If
the Dowager
you,
Empress, as I call him.
the Dowager Empress. God
He
bless
reminds
you.
me of the Dowager Empress in the last fall of China.
The scary dragon lady. I guess everyone calls Dowager Empresses or any mean woman dragon lady. But yeah, the one with the really young son who just killed a bunch of people. That one.
Yeah. In fact, if I was in office, I would always call him the Dowager Empress, because I think people need to draw this connection more to, one, understand just how much he's hurting the country, into two, through a historic parallel, into two, understand just how long within the Chinese bureaucracy somebody who is that toxic to the country's long-term best interest can stay in power if people don't take care of them.
Take care of them. If you were, let's say, someone incredibly competent, the right person for China, were suddenly installed and given autocratic power, what would you have them do? What would you encourage them to do if they came to you and asked you for
First thing
advice?
they need to do is become completely transparent about all of their records, their economy, their population, their
Part of me
fertility.
wonders, so what if Xi Jinping doesn't even know the gravity of this and can't, because there are so many adverse incentives at play where a province is not going to tell you because then they won't get their tax revenue. I feel like
There
there's a
are
crisis
systems
of
you can put
reality.
in place, independent departments, independent branches of government, using things like AI and satellite images, all the stuff that foreigners are using. And then they get commendations and wealth for finding areas where people are fudging things.
All right, so
So
let's say first thing, you establish the Department of Truth and they go out and their job
no,
is
no,
to
no.
just find out what's going on.
Department of Transparency.
Okay.
Then you need to reinstitute goodwill among investors, that if they invest in something, they will be able to get their money into and out of the country easily. That's one of the big things that's going to drive down investment right now, right? As people are terrified that if they put money into China, that the money's never going to be able to come out of China. And because that's true right now, China's basically realized, like, it's system. You need to
What if
develop
suddenly you do that and all of the money?
a lot of the money. This is all going to cause short-term pain. But you're saying within China's autocratic system that apparently can think long term, even though it definitely can't.
No,
What do you
no,
do?
you are a long-termist autocrat
You
suddenly.
need to basically, all of this is around developing investor confidence. You need to develop investor confidence, long-term investor confidence with foreign investors. That is the first core thing you need to do. So everything involved in that,
Okay.
not jailing, making things. If somebody achieves a certain level of wealth, you're not just going to go after them. You're not going to all of that stuff. So investor competence is thing number one. Thing number two is fertility collapse is a national security issue right now. And I may even put it under the purview of the military, focusing on artificial wombs and the like.
Oh, so just invest heavily in science and
Heavily in science and genetics.
right, but what good will artificial wombs do you if no one wants to have kids anyway, whether or not they get pregnant?
You have the state raise them.
So you would encourage the first ever government-funded human production
Yeah.
plan.
I think if you do those two things simultaneously and big enough.
I guess you could, would you, this is very dystopian, but would you offer to pay women a living wage to carry pregnancies to term, and then if they don't want to raise those children
No,
themselves?
but I would disallow anyone from a high-level government position with less than 4 kids.
So yeah, no, the anti-cat lady tenure policy.
I think you need to
Interesting.
create, and you might
But
even
that's nobody, because no one has been allowed to have a lot of
no,
kids.
it's been long enough under the 3-child policy and loosen 1-child restrictions.
What? Come on. When was the 3-child policy?
But no, when was 1-child policy loosened?
No, because it was still culturally so discouraged. There basically no. The policy was formally passed into law by the National People's Congress, the National Legislature of China,
in
on August 20th, 2021 was the
Simone,
3-child policy.
Simone, the 1-child policy was loosened in 2016.
Loosened.
You can say this is the thing, and this is where everybody gets things wrong. They always blame us on the 1-child policy. But the problem is that fertility rate now in China is lower than it ever was under the 1-child policy.
And that's a
even
culture
lower than it
problem.
was during
I'm
the
not going to
pandemic.
listen, you shouldn't penalize people for not having a lot of kids
You
under
need
Xi
to.
Jinping in China during COVID in China. Would you be having kids? No, you would be shouting we are the last generation along with everybody else. No.
Yes,
you can't
and those people
penalize.
need to be penalized. That's the exact point I'm making, Simone. You need to penalize people who aren't
No,
investing
you
in
shouldn't
the future.
penalize people who are making smart and logical decisions.
I disagree strongly. That's the only way you create a cultural change. In fact, I would go further. I may disallow salaries above a certain amount to people who have less than a certain number of kids. I would tap your max possible salary to the number of children you have, which will quickly create the perception that more kids means more wealth.
No, I would. That's a fun concept to reconnect from a policy perspective in general. Because the thing in the past and why people would have a lot of kids, aside from other cultural reasons, was the more kids you had, the more wealthy you were. And if we just reconnect those in some way, either, of course, through progressive tax breaks for the more kids you have, but also just through other means. Yeah, the more kids you have, the more money you're allowed to earn or something. It's just that the level of dystopian control that you have to have over a people to do that is
And
too much. Aren't we
China's
too
level of
libertarian
dystopian
for that?
control-
I know, but
It's different from what I want for America. China is culturally different from America.
okay. So yeah, you're trying to come up with a solution that certainly doesn't fit with our cultural values, that is more coercive, that is more, I'm not going to say evil, that is just creepy because you're like, this is going to work for them.
Yes. You're saying if I was in China, what would I do? Like, the person who's I'd start a democracy is an idiot. That is not what you would do. You need to fix the problem in a Chinese way.
Yeah.
What's actually going to work?
I could see a kind of China making a human production army thing with artificial wombs. They could pull off the look. I feel mean saying that. I again respect China. I was on this really. I was on like a 5. Did I tell you about my 5-hour bus ride to Zhangjiajie from Changsha?
Tell me about it.
5 hours. Like some guy had this cell phone that constantly kept ringing, and it was just children's choirs singing Christmas songs in English. And they were chewing this thing that smelled incredibly strong, like throughout this bus, that just made me want to vomit the whole time. And we're on these twisting roads. So I'm just hearing children's choirs singing Christmas songs and smelling this putrid smell of whatever it is that people are chewing and spitting out on the bus.
It's Betelgeuse, probably.
Betel nuts are an addictive stimulant that's chewed in parts of China, particularly the southern provinces such as Hainan, Jiangxing.
Did they have black teeth?
Yeah.
Yes, Betelgeuse.
Did not smell good. So they were. I've had good moments and I've had bad moments. But like good moment just before that bus drive, the taxi cab driver who took me to the bus station where I took that bus was so concerned about me that he got in to the bus station and helped me buy a ticket and told me where to sit because he was like, "Girl, what are you doing? This is not safe." So they're awesome, cool bro people who help out total nonsense idiot foreigners who are kind and hardworking and enterprising and creative. And it makes me so sad to think that they're under this level of threat. Damn. But I don't know. I wish there were less dystopian way to do this.
There are less dystopian ways to do this, but you've got to. I think that the less dystopian ways of handling this are going to be handled in the immigrant communities. You
Yeah.
can't find a new, like in the US, I'm like, experiment with new ways of having your family culture work, new traditions, new holidays, new ways of relating to things.
What can
This
China
doesn't
do?
work in China.
What can China do right now that other countries can't do? So if suddenly you become transparent and you're like, okay, guys, I now I'm in charge. We're figuring out our population situation. We're going to be financially transparent. You can leave and enter the country as desired. We'd love to welcome immigrants. We'd love to welcome industry. What would you do? Peter Zeihan talks about their natural resources being not great. Like they're not that energy independent. They're not even that food independent. What are you going?
They
I
need
guess
to
I would make them like a
immediately
nuclear
realize they're
hotspot fast, like
No,
small.
that was the thing I was talking about was transparency and everything like that and taking a
Yeah.
short-term hit. The
Uh-huh.
big problem China has now is they got so used to that period where they were a growing power instead of a weakening power that
Mhm.
they built this idea of we'll always be bigger tomorrow, and therefore let's bully the neighboring countries, let's bully the
Mm.
people around us.
Mhm.
They need to understand that they are in a position of short-lived power right now, and they need
Mhm.
to be doing everything they can right now to build goodwill among their neighbors. That 9 dot line that they've drawn, that's not going to hold for 50 years. And when it stops holding, the people who they were bullying are going to be awfully mad at them. They need
Mhm.
to walk back all of this stuff they've been doing in the local region.
Yeah, okay, so start playing nice with others. But then what will a admittedly smaller going forward China do to build prosperity and
They need to, as I said, one, forcing competent people to have more kids, culturally speaking, through the way that you influence them,
okay,
as well as
incentivizing, not forcing, incentivizing through cultural
incentivizing.
means.
The state-raised kids, state-produced kids, that could be an option that they have access to that we don't really have access to.
Mm,
And they I think right now something that is being understated in the investment world is how much of a problem it is that nobody trusts Chinese stock market or wants to put money onto it. And
yeah.
it's not just because they're shrinking. It's because the government has basically said, "Okay, now you put the money in, now we're gonna keep it from going out. Like we tricked
I
you,
guess
haha." And they
here's
don't
an
understand that
interesting
you only
idea.
get to pull this once.
If you create state created humans and state raised humans, maybe China, because China also has an international reputation, I think, of producing very smart, competent, hardworking
Mhm.
people to, with your army of government creative people, like be as though we are the intellectual mercenaries of the world. You want to hire Chinese people, you
Yes.
want, we will build the best factories, we will build, and then they just start investing in all of the type of human infrastructure that will matter in a post AI world, because the rest of the world is too indolent, probably, to raise the sort of disciplined, smart person, practical
Mhm.
person, not hedonic person, to thrive in a post AI society and still matter in a post AI society. So maybe if China did that and they continued with the same, oh, America, you suck with your tittytainment. Like you go and enjoy your hedonism, and we're going to produce our competent, hardworking, tight-lipped people who we will produce and train. Then
Yeah.
maybe they could just be like the one non-idiocracy.
No, that would really be cool if they could do that. And I'd also say that one of the core things that people get wrong when they're predicting future world events and stuff like that
Mm,
is how cheesed America is from so many perspectives.
Mm.
Like, we are not moving into a multipolar world. We are moving into a world in which America is dramatically more dominant than it is today.
And I think a good book to start if you're interested in the subject is Peter Zeihan's book, The End of the World is Just the Beginning. He talks through in a very sort of guns, germs, and steel kind of way just why America has the tailwinds that will give it a huge advantage in the instance of a world in which there is no more support for international trade.
So one is as globalization and global economic systems begin to break down, yes, that is part of why America will be strong, is we are the most self-sufficient country in the world by a dramatic margin, whether it's
Mhm,
energy or food or any of the
mhm,
things that civilization needs to survive.
mhm.
But in addition to that, we also have a weirdly high fertility rate for our level of prosperity and output. And it's because America has what it turns out is the greatest resource any country can have in the 21st century, which is we have religion, and a lot of it, a lot more than any other developed country. And it turns out that a lot of these countries, when they were modernizing and got rid of their religions, did a great harm to themselves. And when I look to the future, when people are like, future world polarity wise, where are you
Mhm,
looking at world power centers?
mhm,
One, people are hugely sleeping on how much power America is going to have. The
mhm.
other area that they're hugely sleeping on is Israel. Like, no matter how positive you could be about Israel, you need to be 10x more positive than that.
Yeah, I guess if we were to look at any country that actually was producing some kind of hyper competent workforce that is famous for going out and getting a lot of things done and that doesn't focus on hedonism over everything else. It was so weird how in your class at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, one of the most difficult schools to get into in the entire world,
Mhm.
there were so many Israeli
So many
students.
Israelis. And I'm
And
not
not
saying
only that,
Jews,
but
I'm saying Israelis.
they weren't just
Oh, and they were all having
doing
kids. They
they
were
were
all
all
having
having
kids.
kids, they all had businesses, and they were going through school. They were,
Yeah.
like, so much more on top of their lives than anyone else, and even though they worked harder, and even though they were incredibly conscientious, they just seemed very happy, like, they were a lot of tortured souls at your school, but they weren't among
None of
them.
the Israelis.
Yeah,
A
not the
lot of the
Israelis.
Jews, a lot of the American Jews were among the tortured soul category that you're talking about.
Reform
None of the
Jews.
Israelis.
Yeah.
And actually, Simone, we have an invitation to go to Israel and meet with and live with some of these Haredi families for a bit. I'd like to take it up at some point.
It's a really cool invitation.
We
It would
know our
involve being
friend
around people.
has invited us to stay with some of the Haredi families in Brooklyn in the next couple
Yeah,
weeks because he's going to be there and he's going to be.
that's so cool.
But I was like, I don't think we have time. I was like, in
Now
future
the timing is not amazing, alas.
In future years, I really want to, but not right now, unfortunately. But yeah, people are they do not understand how much fertility rates in technophilic regions matter.
Yeah, yeah, and I think
Um,
that that's the cool thing is that China has the building blocks. China has the technophilia. China has this I just love how modern so many of the things there are.
Another big advantage, which is they don't have the bureaucratic bloat of other regions.
Yeah. Well, it would
Which is
seem, I don't know, like October 7th seems to have been largely a product of the
okay.
government not
So
having
we
its
were going to
act
do an
together.
episode on this, but we can just briefly mention this now. I have looked at their competence since October 7th in terms of essentially wiping out all of Hezbollah in Palestine.
Well, but keep in mind, though, those that groundwork was laid well before October 7th.
Exactly. And the problem is, Simone, which you might not be considering, that groundwork was laid before October 7th. They wouldn't have been able to execute
Right.
on that groundwork if October 7th hadn't happened. Why were they making plans for how they were going to take out Hezbollah? Like that they obviously, from a geopolitical standpoint, couldn't execute on unless I used to think October 7th, I was like, they must have some level of impossible stupidity here. I am now leaning towards the, oh my God, this was all planned from the beginning.
I'm leaning toward they put so many resources into embedding devices with Hezbollah and getting intel from Hezbollah that they snoozed on Hamas, just being like, you guys are so
Do you
incompetent.
think they could have had Hezbollah wasn't attacking them as aggressively as they are right now? Do you think they could have had all those things explode?
Oh, you mean just from a diplomatic standpoint because they would have
Yeah.
gotten so much heat on it? I think it was an insurance policy because keep in mind, they weren't just incendiary devices or explosive devices. They were also intel gathering devices.
Okay.
So I think it was about optionality to have that there. And who knows? They knew that Iran was probably going to get more resources at some point. Obama had started that trajectory, and that's about when they started doing this. So I think they knew it was going to be a rising threat. I don't think they could have anticipated or even encouraged October 7th. I think it's more of a just they thought that they knew what they were doing, or it seems plausible to me that just what Hamas did was so out of
I'll tell you what. So
left
British
field.
intelligence, when they looked at this, there was a
Yeah.
ex-British intelligence guy, and he was saying, it is shocking that Israel accomplished more in the year and a half than we accomplished during the entire war on terror against the Taliban. He's if we could have dismantled the Taliban to the level that Israel dismantled Hezbollah, this is like 99% more than what we did. Like,
Yeah.
it was stunning that they were able to
Well,
accomplish
here's
this.
what we need to do.
But
We need to
hey,
get
Simone,
like spy
aren't we
novel
glad?
writers in the same room as like government officials or like sci-fi writers and just be like, figure it out, guys. Get creative, man. Get drunk and then just
What I
start
will
making
say
some plans.
is that with all of this in context,
Mm.
we should consider ourselves very fortunate of the Secret Service agencies that apparently are actively attacking us now, which is the British one.
That it's not Mossad.
Yeah, we should be glad that of the ones most likely to support us, it would be the competent
You
one.
wouldn't, but here's the thing about Mossad. You won't know that they're out to get you until you're dead. They're just that effective. So who knows? But yeah, I guess we just did a surprise attack. We're going to talk about China. Here's where we dunk on China. Oh, ha. We love Israel.
Well,
Another one
no,
of
but
those
I just think
episodes.
it's like when I'm thinking about like world players who matter,
Yeah.
Israel literally,
No.
like in my future
Yeah.
calculations of geopolitics,
Yeah.
matters 2x what China matters.
Yeah. Yeah. They're kind of in the potential to have outsized influence, very similar in my mindscape to the UK or Britain before they became the British Imperial Empire. They were this sleepy backwater. Rome didn't even want to hold on to them, right? They sucked. They were gross. It was cold. No
Yeah.
one took them seriously. They were a bunch of barbarians, like you said in that other episode on your one civilization theory. I identify too much with you, Malcolm, but I'm not trying to take credit for it. It's a really good theory.
No, it's ours. You
No,
helped
yeah,
inspire
royal
it.
we.
Somebody really helped inspire it by telling me that I should think more of ancient Chinese civilization. That was really the thing that got me investigating, and then I was like, no, actually, they suck.
Oh my god. So poor China. I'm trying to point out things that I love about China. Szechuan food, people
I
in
love
Szechuan
Szechuan food
province
too.
in
I
general.
love Chinese food. I eat Chinese food almost every week. I
But
love.
also people in Szechuan province are just genuinely awesome people and really cool.
No, I have a lot of Chinese friends. I think that the whole a lot of the Chinese people I know are some of the smartest people I know.
They're crazy smart. Anyway, so yeah, we love China, but I can't remember where I was going. It doesn't matter because we need to make dinner. But I'm sorry to anyone who came here just wanting to hear about China, and
Then
there
you
we
go to
go on
rant
Israel
about
again. But
broader
no,
geo-
yeah, great, yeah. So yeah, no one thought, yeah, Britain was a backwater. No one cared about it. Relatively small population, and yet so much influence in the entire world. And I think it's easy for people to write off Israel to be like, it is a tiny postage stamp of land within a hostile area. Why would they matter? Why are we trying to help them? I don't know. Before the rise of the British Imperial Empire, I would have wanted to know what was going on with these guys, see how I could work with them. So I guess I see your point in that we have to look to the future and look for their potential. So
Yeah, don't make big sacrifices to make alliances with the Ottomans.
yeah,
China
exactly.
right now is the Ottoman Empire.
They're the Ottomans, yeah, sadly. But I think what also gives me hope at the end of this, and I want to end with this because it's where there's hope for China, is that China isn't in China anymore. Just like Venezuela is not in Venezuela.
Yeah, I agree.
We know through our travel agency, which works with a ton of Venezuelans, that all the Venezuelans are in Spain. They're in Peru. They are in Doral.
Competent
They're
Venezuelan,
in,
I should say.
yeah, because they left.
Same as Cuba. Like
and
all the good Cubans, sorry, not good Cubans.
We are going to hell so many times over, Malcolm.
Real Cuba's in Florida.
Yeah, though. And that is a theory that gives me a lot of hope, because when I hear about new news with China's demographic collapse, I just think I weep for China, and it makes me very sad and scared. But then I think about, yeah, all these amazing Chinese immigrant communities throughout the world, and you got stuff. So, yeah, people can move, populations can move and build something even better. And as we've talked about in other episodes, the more that you evolve and move around and play jazz with other cultures and take the best from them and do it better yourself, the more you will thrive and own the future.
And I will say that China is not the most effed world power right now. Germany is. Germany is.
And Latin America is just vaporizing. And no,
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
Latin
we're all
America
in
is
trouble.
innovating. But the
We're
thing
all
is
in
that
trouble.
Latin America has cultural enclaves in other countries that have decent fertility rates.
Mm.
Germany has no backup plan. If I was a German that wanted to maintain German culture, there's nothing left.
Gosh, yeah, there are no, I guess you could say that
Amish.
arguably Amish people are church enclaves, but
And I
I mean,
love the Amish. Oh my God, you should hear their stuff on Trump. We watched the video of them, like them talking about Trump. They are so based.
yeah, they're so based. Love the
Love you to
Amish.
death, Simone. I'll let
Love
you
you
go.
too.
I know.
Bye. Okay. Ciao, ciao. Taquitos.
Oh, are you going to do the
Just get the kids. You get the kids. I'll stir taquitos. And then if you just drop them off, I'll play with them while I cook food, and you can wrap up work for the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
You ready for that?
And let me know what we're getting for replies on this. This is a long and spicy thread with Lyman Stone.
Oh no.
Have you even checked it?
No, I'm just gonna ignore it. I'm very bad with Twitter. Remember, I thought that someone had somehow closed their tweet to replies, and I just didn't know it was blocked because I'm so old.
Other people said then they were blocked. I don't know. But yeah, weird.
Yeah, I don't understand Twitter. X. Sorry.
Yeah, we're definitely at an age now where there's things I don't understand and things I make a real hard focus on staying on top of. AI is something I'm like, I've got to be up to date. Love you.
I love you too. You're seeing that something else came out that.
Yeah, so today, antinatalism documentary, which I actually loved. I haven't seen
That
it
was
at all.
so well done. It was the
So
best
well done.
take on
This guy is a true
antinatalism I've
star.
seen. Yeah, Tim came
I
in.
hope it does incredibly well.
Yeah.
So people haven't seen it. This is the guy who's done some other like really big documentaries. I haven't watched it all yet. I only watched the beginning, but I was like, oh my God, this is so
His storytelling is top drawer, like the way but the problem is that it includes stories of conditions that cause babies to die terrible deaths. So of course I'm crying first thing in the morning while watching this freaking thing.
I'm so sorry. And then the Lyman Stone thing happened today.
Lyman Stone Flame War. So yeah, that was it was so much reading. It was so much reading.
So much reading and so much, I don't know, felt like disingenuousness. He posted the thing where he's like, why are they attacking me out of nowhere? This is the guy who runs the Institute of Family Studies thing. And we're like,
he does, whoa, hold on. In his whole, you haven't even read that. He's like, I don't run the Institute for Family Studies. This is just 10% of their spending that I'm involved with. So he takes umbrage. Even with that.
Well, he just out of the blue, he's like, they just attacked me out of the blue. And I'm like, it may have been that article that you wrote on us that was really long and compared us to Nazis and eugenicists and said that you should be running the pronatalist movement and not us, and that we shouldn't even be considered pronatalists, and tried to that might have and mischaracterized everything we've ever done. They're communitarians, like they only care about people in their community. They're not about trying to help everyone. I'm about trying to help everyone. I'm all about freedom, and I'm going to give everyone freedom. And not only is my movement about freedom, but how dare their movement allow people to use surrogates or do genetic testing? And I'm like, what? You're like contradicting yourself here. Seething. But I'm not going to attack him anymore because I said I'd stop attacking him after this if he doesn't try to undermine the big tent pronatalist movement again to try to take it over. We honestly could have been a lot worse to him. I had a much meaner episode planned about him, but we ended up just talking about it in the episode where we were talking about, what was it? When it is not true, because this is something he believes that more wealth doesn't lead to lower fertility rates. And I'm like, that belief, continually arguing that, which he does persistently throughout all his work. And he's like, why are they telling reporters not to talk to me? I'm like, that's like an environmentalist arguing that like industrial logging doesn't hurt the rainforest because one person is like planting trees, or like they can find this one study. Like broadly, everyone who's sane knows that industrial logging hurts the rainforest, and other environmentalists aren't going to send reporters to talk to you. Like, obviously, if you're the pronatalist version of a flat earther, when a reporter comes to me, I'm like, yeah, don't talk to the guy who doesn't think that wealth causes lower fertility rates. That's a pretty insane position when you can just Google any graph on this and you will see it as a very strong trend. But yeah, I don't want to go too deep on that particular thing. So what was the other thing? He said there was something else that came out today that was stressful. You read this
It
morning.
wasn't stressful. It's more
the Swedish piece. They were so mean to us.
the Swedish place. That I think it was a translation, but it was like
they said the parents who beat their children.
Yeah, the parents who beat their children and want everyone to have children, and that we live in a dank farmhouse.
They said we live in a dingy farmhouse.
Dingy, that was the word, dingy. I was like, oh, I wonder if there's a like more diplomatic way that this is written in Swedish, or did she just like flat out call our home dingy?
Was this somebody who came to our house, or were they writing about somebody else?
She's the woman who came to our house. Her picture's at the very end of the article. You remember she wore the bright shirt.
Oh, I like that they included a lot of our full arguments in that piece. That's always nice when somebody does that.
Well, we always ask someone to come at us. We're always like, be controversial, frame us as villains. And I'm glad she did it because it made the article more interesting. But
yeah,
it's always stressful reading those and being like, wait, my house is dingy. I try to clean up before people come.
I thought it was a good article, and it's the type of article that I would want written.
No, but it's always stressful for anyone to talk about, like to read anything about you. It's just as stressful if it's positive. So I'm just ready to de-stress. Let's talk about China as a dumpster fire. It's going to make me feel so much better. Okay. Let's do it.
Okay.
What do you want for dinner, by the way?
You know, it'd be really cool if you learned how to make taquitos.
That can't be hard to do, but I would need to, oh my God, wait a second. No, I can hold on. What if I tried this? I will make corn tortilla taquitos using your slow cooker beef. And keep in mind, that is prime beef, the Christmas beef.
That's perfect.
I will try it. I don't know exactly how they're properly cooked. I'm just going to first lightly fry corn tortillas in butter. Then I'm going to roll them in the meat, which I will saute ahead of time with some pumpkin. Would you like put some pumpkin or not?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Put some pumpkin.
And then I will cook them further in the air fryer.
That's exactly what I would have suggested.
All right, let's see, with maybe some melted cheese on top. I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet, but we're going to see how that goes. No melted cheese. We're going to try dry. You can dip them in sauces. We're going to see how this works. I'm excited for it. Okay.
By the way, the episode we did today on the spy, it got demonetized. And I think it's because we were talking about things that we aren't allowed to talk about. So just don't. No, even saying we aren't allowed to talk about something, you can't say that.
Okay.
I deleted everything else. So that must have been what flagged it.
That is so creepy.
That's really dystopian. Yeah. We live here. Have fun. The deep state is spying on us. And
we can't say that.
One of the comments that somebody had that got to me is they were like, they did arrest like random women who nobody follows for questioning their school board. Do you think with your guys' platform, they're not going to attack you? And I was like, that makes sense.
Touche.
Right.
Creepy.